Hi everyone, welcome to. I was going to say something. Oops, my brain's still processing this. Okay, so welcome to the second surgery. So this is BMAT surgery number 2, and that will be for critical thinking. Okay, so I won't dwell too much on this. If you don't know who I am, just go to the previous session. It should be on YouTube by now. All you have to know is I've worked with loads of schools. I have a great network, and I have a pretty good BMAT score, as you can see over here. I also own one of the largest communities for the BMAT, so it's called r/BMAT exam. So 1 in 2 applicants visits the subreddit every year to ask questions or just to read our previous answers from previous years. So highly recommend that you check this out. Also, don't forget to check out 6MED. I've made a frequently asked questions guide, which you can find here. It'll be, I believe it's going to be the top 2 posts. So you should be able to see it straight away as soon as you enter the subreddit. So I've answered most of your questions, such as what's a good BMAT school? What's the BMAT? How was it scored? How did you prepare? Etc. So I would suggest that you check that out as well. Okay, so what will you get away with from this session? So you'll get away with concise information. So also I say so quite a lot. So yeah, it's not really sick. It's just I love using filler words for some reason. Anyway, let's look at what you must learn without wasting time. You'll also look at answers to queries. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email team@6med.co.uk. And finally, we'll go over some questions. Today we'll be going over critical thinking. Okay, critical thinking, it's by far the easiest area to prepare for in the BMAT, mostly because the questions are always the exact same style. Preparing is easy because of this. Make sure that you make the most out of this, because if you are pretty bad at problem solving or you don't have enough time to do problem solving questions, you can gain time in problem solving by doing critical thinking faster. I've had students, for those who don't know, I also tutor. So I had students from both schools and also privately who used to struggle with section 1 quite a lot because they didn't have enough time to do the questions. What we did was I gave them some strategies for section 1 within over, I think it was about 8 hours. That's not really relevant though, is it? The point is, their scores improved quite a lot because they were doing questions which took about a minute and 52 seconds in about 20 seconds. What that means is they were able to transfer the time that they were meant to spend on critical thinking to problem solving. And that can be a game changer. From last session, this should be quite familiar to you if you've been to the last session. If you haven't, or if you're watching recordings, feel free to pause this. This is all the info they need. I'm not going to repeat this. All you have to know is that the BMAT this year is going to be paper-based. It will not be online, and it's a bit more expensive than last year, and it's happening on the 18th of October. We'll get your results on the 25th of November. Okay, BMAT sections. So there's the first section is section 1, which is thinking skills. It's very similar to the TSA, thinking skills assessment, just literally why it's called thinking skills. So you have problem solving and critical thinking. There'll be 50 questions, which take half an hour each. So you have half an hour for problem solving, half an hour for critical thinking, which in total equals 1 hour. Quick math. However, as I've said, critical thinking shouldn't be taking you half an hour. You can do it a lot faster if you know what to do, which by definition is not many people, but if you're able to really master the critical thinking, you can access those higher scores quite easily. As you can see, most candidates score within the 4 to 5 range. I would say that the most common scores are these scores right here. Give it a look. I would go a bit further by doing this. So 2.5 to 6.0 are, I would imagine to have about 80% of scores. So anything below, you're doing terrible. Anything above, and you're doing fantastic. These scores are usually the score for Oxbridge. If you're applying to Oxbridge, so Oxford, Imperial, UCL, Cambridge. If you're also applying for the Nanyang Technology University, so NTU as well in Singapore, you might want to aim for these scores, especially in NTU, because in NTU, I believe that the top 10% of applicants scores within this bracket right here. So NTU applicants, if you want to be the top 10%, get 7s. Easier said than done, though. A 7 is a very outstanding achievement. However, the averages in Singapore are higher for some reason. I believe it should be because the education system is really solid. I mean, the A-levels, like Singaporean A-levels, Cambridge A-levels, they're pretty solid. Anyone who wants to give them a go, feel free to do so in your own leisure. They're very enjoyable. Anyway, so what are the key mistakes for critical thinking? Great question. I'm glad you asked. So, first error is panicking. So many students, they'll start the critical thinking questions. They'll read it once, they read it twice, they read it 3 times maybe, and they still don't get the passage. They read it and they're just like, okay, what the hell have I just read? They get really confused. Okay, so for those who are very confused about this, just skip the question. Don't spend so much time on one question. It will not pay off. So don't panic. Sometimes they look hard, they're actually quite easy. Remember, guys, the BMAT is a skills test. It's not testing your knowledge of philosophy or logic. It's not testing your knowledge. Well, it kind of is testing your knowledge on science and maths, but it's testing more your application and your ability to spot traps. So most of the questions in the BMAT can be answered if you had unlimited time. So can you guys agree that if you had infinite time, you'd be able to score 100% or pretty close to 100% in the BMAT? What do you guys think, chat? Yes. So most people here agree with me when I say that with unlimited timing, you could get 100% in BMAT. And that's a real thing. Most of you, if you've done your homework, you should be able to. So the BMAT is not about what you know, but how quickly you can recall something, how quickly you can apply something. That is the key. So as I've said, there is a lot of bad time management in the test. So let me guess, most of you struggle with section 2. You struggle to finish the paper. So most of you struggle to finish the paper then, I assume. Feel free to engage in the chat, by the way. I'll be answering Q&As at the end as well. Okay. Okay, so Bad time management. If you can't do the questions quickly, skip them. Do not try to dwell on the same question. I tell my students all the time, don't try to be a hero. Don't try to show off that you can do the hard question that no one was able to do. Because while you were stuck with that question, someone else could have done 3, 4, maybe even 5 questions. Some students here, they really struggle with problem solving. We did problem solving last time. However, there was something that I didn't really talk about with problem solving. With problem solving, you are meant to take longer than the 1 minute and 53 seconds that they give you for some of them. However, so some of you might have been like, okay, I've done this question. However, it takes so long, you start getting frustrated because you don't really, you feel like you're wasting so much time on that one question, you just skip it. You spend about maybe 2 minutes on that problem solving question. You're pretty much done. Like you have like 3 or 4 steps left. However, you just start getting frustrated that you've wasted so much time and just skip that after doing so much work. Has that happened to you guys? The question looks easy at first. You spend 1 minute, 2 minutes, maybe even 3, and then next thing you know, you skip it. That's because problem solving is not meant to take the time that they give you. You are not meant to spend so much time on critical thinking. So, you know how we have 16 questions for CT? So CT stands for critical thinking. I'll be using this term quite a lot. And 16 for problem solving, PS. It's not personal statements, it's problem solving. If you have 1 hour, okay, you have 16 for PS, 16 for critical thinking. If you have 60 minutes, what would be the logical timing they should be spending on each? Like logically, how much should you be spending according to the examiners on each part? How long do they suggest that you spend? I mean, like for the 16 questions. So to do the problem solving and critical thinking, how long should you be spending to do all 16 problem solving questions if you have an hour? And there are 32 questions in total. So 30 minutes, give or take. It's critical thinking, same thing. However, what I have found was that you can spend way less in critical thinking. Some of my students were able to do these 16 critical thinking questions in 15 to 20 minutes. And no, they're not geniuses. They just learned how to approach the questions effectively and efficiently. So it's definitely possible, guys. So my argument is that you don't have to spend half an hour on critical thinking. What you can do instead is 40 minutes on problem solving, 20 minutes on critical thinking. And this is much more valuable, in my opinion. Once you do this, and also this is assuming that you master critical thinking. If you master critical thinking, you have a lot more time to really get with grips with those questions that take ages. And let's be honest, guys, not every single problem solving question will take 4 minutes, give or take. I would say about half of them are actually like really doable. It takes you maybe 1, 2 minutes to do those questions. However, the other half takes a bit longer. Probably I'll argue twice as long. So if you use this strategy, what you'll end up with is you just have so much time to do problem solving. Data analysis has been removed for the BMAT. So data analysis removed from BMAT. This happens in 2020. So 2020 onwards has no data analysis. There are 0. Now there's just problem solving and critical thinking in the BMAT. So you might notice that in all of the papers, so 2003 to 2019 have those questions which are like, this passage refers to questions 9 to 13. So those questions that relate to the exact same passage are no longer in the paper. You only have one question for one passage. This applies for both critical thinking and problem solving. You will not get data analysis in the papers. And finally, lack of planning. So critical thinking is a lot like a puzzle. If you spot the trick, it is so quickly. It can be done so quickly. Sorry. So think about the methods before thinking a question. You should be having a set method for different question types. And this is no different with critical thinking. If you're able to plan straight away and you know what to do for different question types, you'll be at a big advantage compared to most applicants. When it comes to critical thinking, you have 16 questions. It takes you less than 2 minutes per question. You have conclusions, flaws, assumptions, etc. Some of you might have seen me in the webinar with Dr. Matthew Williams from Jesus College, University of Oxford. So we made a webinar where we went over some other questions and we went over some methods as well. You might remember that I went over some of these questions. So conclusions, flaws, principles, assumptions, strengthening and weakening arguments, and parallel reasoning. All these questions, these are all the question types for critical thinking. There's also drawing, and so you can have drawing conclusions and best expresses conclusion, but they're both conclusions as well. Something I want to just this was talked about in the previous session, so I won't dwell too much on this. However, most students, they really, really struggle because of this. So how many places are there in medical school, guys? Any ideas? How many places are available for all medical schools in the UK? Someone said 9,000. That is about right, correct. So about 9,000 for all medical schools. For BMAT, I would say about 2,000, give or take. I would say that's correct as well. So you used to have 2,000 reapplicants. So these people already did the tests. They're automatically ahead of you because they had the personal statements. They already know, so sure. Okay, so someone asked for me to go over this again. So the question types for critical thinking are conclusions, flaws, principles, assumptions, strengthening arguments, weakening arguments, and parallel reasoning. With conclusions, you also have two question types. So you have drawing conclusions, and you also have best expresses conclusion. They're both different question types, but they are both within the conclusion realm as well. You have a minute and 52.8 seconds or a minute and 53 seconds if you want to go for the official timings. However, I would say that for different question types, they take different times. So conclusion should take about 20 to 30 seconds. Assumption should take about 30 to 40 seconds. Strengthening the argument should take about 30 seconds. Parallel reasoning should take about 40 seconds. Flaws should take you about 30 to 40 seconds. And principles, finally, should take about 40 to 50 seconds. The reason is you have to read a passage in principles, whereas for the other questions, you don't have to do this. Some of you might be surprised by this. I can't hear anyone. However, I can assume that people are looking at this like, Martin, what are you saying? I spend 2 minutes in parallel reasoning, for example. Would I be correct in saying this? What do you guys think about these timings? Do you look unreasonable? Which one specifically look unreasonable, in your opinion? Some people say conclusions, principles, parallel reasoning. What if I tell you guys that concluding questions are the easiest question types because they only have one step? So you have one step for conclusion questions, you have 3 for flaws, 1 for principles. However, the problem with principle questions is that they're really long. They are so long to complete. So you have about 12 lines of text to read, which is why they take a lot longer because you have to speed read for the passage and also still get the rough idea, or the principle in this case. With assumptions, you have two steps. Strengthening and weakening have 2 steps. Parallel reasoning, you have 3 steps. So skills-wise, parallel reasoning is the most demanding of the skills. You have 3 steps for parallel reasoning. For conclusion, you have 1. You just have to find a conclusion. Parallel reasoning is a lot trickier. However, this is an opportunity. What if I tell you that for students who have been trained, they found parallel reasoning the easiest, along with the flaws? So flaws, assumptions, and parallel reasoning are the easiest question types for students who really know the strategies. The biggest problem for students are conclusion questions because they don't know what a conclusion is. So the thing is, what if I tell you guys? I would like to just add that the methods that I go over some questions are not within the scope because I'm following a different curriculum for these sessions. However, when I do my own papers, I rarely read the whole passage. So for conclusions, I just read about 4 words. That's all I have to read to know what the conclusion is. 4 words is all it takes, give or take. For flaws, I have to just spot 1 word. Principles, I have to read the whole thing, unfortunately. There's not really a way around this. Parallel reasoning, I would say I have to find I'll probably have to read 2 sentences in order to just spot what I need to do. Assumptions, they require a bit more thought, so you have to read 2 sentences. And strengthening and weakening arguments, you just have to read, well, a few more because you have to think about how it affects the wider context of the passage. Also, in 4 questions, have you guys noticed how there are multiple flaws in the argument? So I've spotted a question. I will see if I can find it and send it on the group chat afterwards. So there was a question which had about 4 flaws. It was a past paper question, the BMAT, and that question had 4 flaws in the passage. And I've received loads of questions like, Martin, how do I know which flaw it is? Oh, sure. So people really, really don't know how to spot flaws because in some passages, there are multiple flaws. So you just don't really know what flaws you are meant to look for because if the passage asks you for the flaw, if the question asks you for the flaw, and there are multiple flaws in the passage, how do you pick the one which you need? Well, these are all skills which are developed as time goes on, really. Either you build it with intuition or methods. There's not really a way around it. Most students rely on intuition for the BMATs. So if you struggle with critical thinking, you might really benefit from just doing as many questions as you can on times because you'll be building up the BAT's intuition, which in turn helps you to really, really understand and master those questions. But yeah, reading those questions multiple times is normal. I've had students who used to take 4 minutes in parallel reasoning. It is a real thing. So you really have to teach them other ways to reapproach questions. I will go over a few methods which are taught, major methods. However, what I wanted to emphasize is, in previous years, you had 2,000 students who took their UCATs, maybe their BMATs. They already had the personal statements, they are finished with A levels. So what's the only thing that they have to focus on during the gap year? Admission tests. If they finish their A levels, or IB, or pre-U, or HKDSE, or CBSE, whatever, which body, well, the only thing they have to worry about is the BMAT and or the UCAT. Now, this number has doubled, while the number of medical school places hasn't increased it hasn't doubled, essentially. So you are competing against twice as more people. About half of the places available are being competed for by reapplicants. And these people are the ones they should be worrying about. So you shouldn't be worrying about these that much. The problem are these people because they are quite ahead of everyone else. They know what the test is all about. They already know what went wrong usually. So what it means is they have less things to prepare for and they have more time. And remember, guys, this year the BMAT is on the 18th of October. And as I've said in last session, you used to have half term to prepare and really do some cramming for the BMAT. As the BMAT is in October now and not in November, you've lost this privilege, unfortunately. So consider approaching the tests in a different way. It is an opportunity, not a hurdle. They're not trying to catch you out. These tests are meant to reward you for your hard work. So for those who don't know, you spend about 180 hours. So these are the official numbers the exam board says. So you should be having about 180 hours of teaching or contact hours for A levels. This is for one A level. My point is, most students spend less than 180 hours on the BMAT because they have other stuff to do. However, this is an opportunity because if most students don't spend this much time on tests, which one do you think is more important, the BMAT or A levels? So if the BMAT is more important, the BMAT is more important because that will determine if you get an interview and an offer. The BMAT plays a role in both the interview stages and the pre-interview, so the selection stage or shortlisting. So it's more important, you should be focusing more on the BMAT rather than A levels at the moment. If you are a year 13 student or you're going to year 13, you have plenty of time to catch up as long as you have your predicted. Focus on the BMAT because that will determine if you get an interview. There is no way around it. And as I've said, if this is what you spend on A levels, why would you spend 10 hours on BMAT? I see this many years. Students, they start preparing a week before. I would assume that you wouldn't start learning your A levels from scratch a week before. You've at least been to lessons, you have a rough idea. So you should be putting at least the exact same efforts in the BMAT as you do for A levels. I'll go over the Q&A in a second. However, actually, I'll go for the Q&A now. I'll do some questions later. So what are the major topics for BMAT Maths section? We'll be going over BMAT Maths in 3 to 4 sessions. So do not worry, they will come eventually. How long should you spend a day revising for the BMATs? It depends on which stage of the preparation you're at the moment. So have you just started your preparation or are you already quite advanced in your preparation? As of September, I would advise 4 hours a day. It's a lot, however, it's worth it. 4 to 6 hours with breaks. So maybe do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours in the evening. Okay, so is this session for tips on how to do the questions in this section? Yes, it is. We'll be going over some critical thinking questions shortly. I just wanted to do some quick introduction. How can I practice logical and critical thinking as I often misunderstand the text and question? With problem solving, it's logic. It is more about practice. Problem solving is very cliche. However, you can't really prepare for problem solving as you would with the VBATs. So when I started doing problem solving sessions with some of my students, what we did was we went over some math topics that we use in problem solving. So in one of the problem solving sessions, I went over combinatorics. So the whole idea behind factorials, because I'm not sure if you guys have seen there was a question that used factorials. So I taught that. So problem solving, it's more about learning the maths and then being able to apply it. rather than learning how to do a specific question type. Sure, there are some question types in problem solving which repeat themselves. However, the format is always so different that it's going to be a total waste of time for you to prepare for question types in problem solving. You can be going on about pin questions or spatial reasoning, etc. Sure, those are all very helpful. Don't get me wrong. However, the problem is those questions will always change every year. One day it can be a cube, one day it can be 2 cubes, another paper it was 3 cubes, and another it was a pyramid. And there was one question which is quite common in problem solving as well, which is to compare the difference in costs of two things. Or they give you a table and they say, oh, I'm looking for these specifications and this is my budget. And you have to walk through the tables as quickly and accurately as possible. This is fine. However, as the wording is always so different every year, it's not worth preparing for these type of questions. It's better for you to build intuition with problem solving. However, with critical thinking, you have to develop strategies. So as I've said, you have 2 ways. First thing, you can get strategies, and then there are 2 types. So generic. So these are the strategies taught in literally any course for the BMAT. And how do I know this? And let's just say that I've been to all of them. So the generic ones would be if A and B, A, therefore B, something around these lines. Some of you might have learned this as Plato is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Plato is immortal. This is a textbook example of logic. If you've been to literally any BMAT course, this is what you've been taught. However, let's think about this strategy here. Do you guys think it's going to be efficient for a question like this? And bear in mind, these are the specimen paper questions. These are a lot shorter than what you will get in your BMAT. In your BMAT, you should expect questions to be about this long. So maybe add 3 more lines to this. Do you guys think it's going to be efficient for me to go over every sentence and be like, okay, so A, B, not enough, C, D, E, F, etc. Do you guys think this is efficient? When you have a minute and 33 seconds, not only have to do this for sentences, but then you have to read the options. Look, they get quite long. And these are some of the shortest questions as well. So this is what I mean by generic. These methods are the ones that were taught back when the BMAT was a lot shorter and easier. So for those generic methods, it's basically for those who really, don't have anything else, which is fair enough. However, I'll say these methods and their effectiveness is long gone. Their effectiveness for these methods are long gone because, as I've showed you, it takes so much time to go over this, and it's really not worth it. And that's so. For those who struggle with critical thinking, is this how you approach the questions? Do you go over this method of logical form? Is this what you use? So for those who do critical thinking questions or have done them, is this how you approach them? I'm quite curious to see the distribution of this. Okay, someone looks at the ideas behind a key piece of text, then remove illogical options. Some of them say kind of, some of them say the conclusion just seem obvious to me when I read the passage. Okay. We have 3 examples here. First one is they rely on verbal reasoning. Second one relies on methods, and the third one relies on intuition. And this is what I was just trying to say there. This is a perfect example in this jazz. So subjects rely on methods, generic. Some of them rely on verbal reasoning. And no, it's not VR for the ECAT. It's completely different for the BMAT. And then you have intuition. However, my approach, oh, by the way, I'm not sure if I've told you guys, however, I've helped students score a 9 in section 1. So 7s, 8s, and 9s. I've seen about 5 scores in the past 2 years with those scores. No, the past year, my apologies. One of the students received a 9 in section 1. The approach was we tried to merge all these aspects. So instead of having a generic approach, why don't you make your own approach? Unfortunately, I'm following a curriculum. I will not be giving away any of these methods that I'm talking about. However, for those who want to improve, try to make your own methods, which combine your verbal reasoning and intuition. Because if you have methods, if you have like specific set approaches for the questions, which rely on your intuition and your verbal reasoning skills, you'll do a lot better. And this is how I was able to do questions for the last about 20 seconds to 40 seconds in critical thinking. You have to look at methods which are a bit more, they're a bit more flexible. They take a lot longer. They take a lot, they don't take as long as the if A then B. Okay, now I'll go over some examples with some of the methods that you might have been taught. So, which of the following best expresses the main conclusion of the above arguments? For this question, you must be looking for the conclusion. So it's the most, it's essentially like the sentence which summarizes the entire argument. So I'll go over the whole thing just because there are people from different levels here. Some people have done critical thinking loads, some people haven't done them at least, they've probably done like a few questions. Some people have never seen them before. So what I will do is I will go over these questions as if you were a total beginner. Organic farming of animals and crops involves the environment through a reduced use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. But this does not go far enough. Okay. So this doesn't go far enough. It would be preferable to have a totally vegetarian agriculture. Okay, that seems like a very conclusion-ish sentence. And then they say 90% of vegetable matter fed to farm animals passes straight through with its calorific content intact. Okay, so this is a bit of info. They're giving us some info to justify the claim which has been made before. By eating vegetables directly rather than feeding them to animals, substantially less land would have to be farmed. Again, another justifying again. While justifying the point which has been made. So and then the remaining land could be returned to its historical state, mixed. Yeah. So essentially what's happening here is they have, well, another reason, essentially. So the one which most, kind of summarizes the entire arguments in this sentence right here. Okay, so organic farming enhances the environment. No, doesn't really summarize the arguments. It would be preferable to have a totally vegetarian agriculture. Yes, it is the correct answer because we've been using these points and we've used the entire argument to justify this sentence. as you can see here, it says it would be preferable to have a totally vegetarian agriculture. And then they give us reasons for why that will be. So therefore, the answer is B, and we can just move on to the next question. Okay, so which of the following best illustrates the principle underlying the arguments above? So principle questions can be a bit trickier because you really have to get the gist out of the question and to really get the whole message, because there's not really a conclusion. Sometimes there might be if they're feeling a bit nice, but as a good rule of thumb, they don't really give you well, handouts. That's what I would call it. So the treatments of unauthorized immigrants by many countries is often cruel and lacking in compassion. Even refugees from war-torn or famine-stricken regions can find themselves imprisoned on arrival or deported back to the place they had fled. It is a terrible decision to have to take, but if you make an exception to the law for one person, we ought to make the same exception for everyone. If some illegal entrants were allowed to stay, others would have to be treated equally. No country, especially one that is already overpopulated, could physically accommodate the numbers that would then follow. The regulations have to be enforced rigidly, even if this means turning away people in great need. The point is, you must treat everyone fairly. Treat everyone fairly. What you do for one person is what you must do for everyone else. You can't make exceptions. You must give them the same treatment. Everyone must be treated equally. So it's more about equality. Now, we will go over these passages here, and the one that sounds more about equality is the one that we will pick. Because of fire regulations, the number of people attending the concerts will have to be strictly limited. But no, it has nothing to do with it. It's completely irrelevant. There's not really an explanation for this. Because it's not really talking about equality. It's talking about, because of this problem, we have to do this. G, growing urban traffic congestion means that in the future, the number of cars entering some city centers will have to be restricted. Again, same idea as A. Nothing has changed. C, all shoplifters must be prosecuted because if one is let off, others would rightly expect the same leniency. Yes, it's all about treating others fairly. You can't have favoritism. What you do for one person, you do for everyone else. So therefore, the answer is C, because it's all about equality. So that's how you solve principal questions, essentially. You look for the rough idea, and then you pick the passage which most closely resembles the gist of it. It is kind of a conclusion type of question, but not really. Because I would argue that this is the conclusion here. So it's more about the moral arguments, if anything. So the principles, again, some people have principles, some things that's important for them. So it's more about what's important for the author of the passage. In this case, he wants people to be treated equally. So principles are not quite conclusions. They're a bit more like a set of values, which you have to find. So when you read these questions, you just have to think, okay, so what are the values and the background of this person? And can I apply, their values? And to give another example. So it's more about values rather than a conclusion. It's not quite a conclusion question. Okay, and flaws. So question 10, it's a flaw question. Only shareholders are eligible to vote on the proposed takeover of the company by a large multinational. They can either vote for or against or abstain by not voting at all, and the side with the most votes wins, essentially. So if the majority vote in favor, the takeover will be approved. However, less than half of the eligible voters are in favor of the proposal, which means that the takeover will not be approved. So The problem with this is that we are assuming that everyone that's against will vote. Can you guys see how this kind of links back to this? Because the whole argument is built on this is not possible because there's not enough numbers, because a percentage of the eligible voters. So it's more about mixing percentages with absolute numbers. So sometimes people mix something that's a percentage with something that's absolute. So you can't do this because, sure, while a percentage of those who are eligible, like a small percentage, doesn't really agree with it, there can be a case where those who disagree don't vote at all. So even if it had 1% that was in favor and 99% which disagreed, however, if those 99% do not vote at all, the deal will still go through. So it's really more about mixing absolutes and percentages, absolute numbers and percentages. So let's look at which one better reflects this. Some of those in favor might change their minds. Nope, nothing against it. The large multinational could pull out. No, don't care. Some voters may abstain. Perfect. That's exactly what we've just said. So guess what? That is a correct answer. Any questions, guys? Do you have any questions? Okay, so I'll just go over this quickly. So how can we best help you? You can go for YouTube channels. There's a lot of free information on the BMAT on YouTube. A lot of it is generic. However, it's still worth watching them, even though most of the info will be like, okay, just read the question, do your homework. That's basically what those videos will say most of the time. If you watch them, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You can also check out r/BMAT exam. I answer people's questions there quite often. And you may want to check out the frequently asked questions guide that I've made. You can give the 6-minute surgeries and also 6-minute social media. So there are WhatsApp groups, Discord servers, and also the main pages. So if you want to invest a bit more, then go for BMAT books, BMAT Ninja, or the 6-minute masterclass. And finally, if you want something a bit more intense, that's also paid, then you can go for courses, tuition, or BMAT bundles. Sometimes I've reviewed some companies in the past. This is not something that I do at the moment because I've been so busy with schools and students. However, if you want some reviews, then feel free to check out the reviews available here. Okay, guys, Q&A time. I'm all yours for the remaining of this Q&A. Do we need to memorize any info for critical thinking questions? Yes, you do. You have to memorize, well, you have to learn quite a few things, actually. You have to know the methods. Sometimes you need to learn a bit more backgrounds on different question types. So for flow specifically, there's quite a bit of knowledge and theory that you must go over as well. What is the cumulative marking system for the BMATs? So BMAT marking, 9 equals, I would say about top 1 to top 5 in the world, and 8 is roughly top 1%. 7 should be about top 3%, maybe 4%. Depends on the year as well. 6 is about top 20 to 15%. Yes, I know that these numbers don't match that well. However, there are some like high 7s, low 7s, and also bear in mind that the distribution varies every year. A 5, as a good rule of thumb, is top 20% to about top 40% if you're being generous. And yeah, 4 and below is top 50%. And to the bottom 50%, I guess. The bottom 1%. So yeah, for most universities, so this is the school you want for Oxbridge, international. If you're international students, if you are a local student applying for Oxbridge, Imperial, UCL, then so UK home students for Oxbridge, Imperial, and UCL. Fives are recommended for universities like Leeds, BSMS, Lancaster. And if you are international students, then Kiel as well for internationals. So I hope that makes sense. What's the most probable time needed for BMAT preparation? I'll recommend about 4 or 5 hours a day, maybe even 6 if you're stretching it, depending on how far and how much prep you've done. 4 to 6 hours a day until your test date. Manchester is not really a BMAT university. However, again, UCAT score-wise, I would say that 2,800 is a good score for most unis. 2,800 band 1 is solid for most UCAT universities. If you start preparing now, I recommend 6 hours a day. Okay. If you also want to talk to 6meds, then team at 6med.co.uk as well. If you want to talk to 6meds, my personal contact details are. But okay. What type of questions in critical thinking would require the most practice? Parallel reasoning and conclusion questions. Those are like the ones that require the most skill. The other ones are just methods. If you follow a method, then it's quite easy and straightforward. But these two can be quite tricky. You mentioned that for someone who has just started revising for the BMATs, they should aim to spend about 4 hours a day revising for the BMATs. What would be the best way to manage our time, considering most of us will be going back to school shortly? Well, this is quite bad advice. However, I would say just neglect your A-levels for the meantime. Some teachers and schools are very understanding of this, some are not. I've seen cases from people just skipping school for a while, mostly in October, just because they said they were ill, they had COVID. Don't recommend it. You know, if you want to go through that path, then you might as well go for it. And yeah, yes, I guess there's one way to go about it as well. It's just yeah, just basically neglecting your A-levels is how I'd go about it if you haven't really prepared loads. Okay. Yeah, I guess the study plan would be better for it. So these would be like the ones I recommend: study plans, tuition, focus more on the BMATs, because the thing is, this is great because you don't have to do your research. With tuition, someone has already done the research for you, and that's why it's so convenient and students do really well. It's not because tuition won't really give you any magic strategies unless your teacher is really good. But yeah, you don't have to do that research, so you can use your time a lot more effectively. Mhm. Yeah, so for Manchester, it's going to be UCAD. And there were some, okay, we have some people that have been doing the NEET. It's just a fun fact. I've also, I have some friends that went to schools. So if you're from India, you might be familiar with the GEMS school chain. I have some friends that sent me some resources from, wait 1 second. All right, 1 sec. Apologies, there was just a bit of a small technical problem. Well, not really technical, just my cat. Just being my cat. Okay, so I'll talk about the NEET. So as I've said, so I have some friends that went to the GEMS school chain. So I'm quite familiar with the NEET. However, you don't really have to submit your NEET score. The NEET will not be looked at for international applications. You just need the BMAT. So yeah. So for those who don't know, the NEET is the medicine test for India, and you have the GE or the G, which is used for engineering. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. The NEET is not required. However, the chemistry questions are very good for the BMAT. I've done quite a few papers for the NEET and the G, and they can be really fun. NEET score is not required. However, that's for like India, like Indian medical schools. For the British one, they don't really have to do the NEET. For the essay section, we'll be going over this in, well, 4 surgeries done. So bear that in mind. However, if you want to go ahead, then, you know, you can watch the ACE, the BMAT, Jesus College video on YouTube. So this is a webinar where I went over an essay. So you might want to watch that as well if you want to get a bit ahead of yourself. And I don't really care that much about placements. Most of it could just email and interviews make about, well, about 80% of your application, really. So BMAT kind of just determines if you get an interview, and then the interview just kind of make up about, I would say about 60% in like the offer holder stage. What question examples require intuition, and is there any way to improve that? All of these require some intuition to an extent. So to improve, you need to find effective methods, so you can just use them for, there are two ways to do this. First one is practice. Second one is just tuition, because someone has done the research for you. And practice as well. So you do loads of questions, eventually you just get better at them as well. It's a bit of both. So it depends on the university as well. However, are you taking the CBSE or the IB? Because it really depends on which one you're taking as well. So are you taking the CBSE, IB, or A level? Because if you're taking the CBSE, then okay, so these exams open the door, so they allow you to apply. Personal statements and references, they essentially give you in university a bit more background about yourself. So it's more about the personality. Like, it's not just about the grades. They're just looking at who's the person behind this. Are they going to be a good doctor? And then the BMAT is a way to compare yourself to all applicants. So it determines who gets in an interview, and then finally interview. So it's 60 to 80% decides if he gets in, and the remaining 40 to 20% is the BMAT again. So the BMAT does have a rule in the offer stage. So they'll look at both the BMATs and how he did in interviews. Well, for the SAT, you might want to have at least, well, it depends on the university. Some universities don't take the SAT. Some universities look at the APs instead, advanced placements. So that really depends. Different universities have different requirements, and you can find what schools they need on the website for high school exams. So there can be the CBSE. Yeah, there. So Oxbridge looks at APs. The SAT is not considered. So yeah, I believe that this should be all. Do you guys have any more questions? Any questions, guys? Okay, so the YouTube channel is so it's youtube.com/c/Martin Pereira pathways. The M and the P's, so this is capital letter, and capital letter. Sometimes I post videos there. Yeah, internships don't help directly with your application. It just shows that you have an awareness of the course and what to expect. A lot of students don't do work experience. Quite a lot do, but not all, and it's definitely not necessary. Well, for some universities. That works. 4 weeks of work experience and volunteering is plenty. It's not about what you've done, but how you talk about it. Also, in my opinion, the best post statements had the least flashy experiences. The best one had an experience about serving tea for patients. It was probably one of the best ones I've read. So it's more about serving rather than just observing. A post statement must be proactive. Be proactive in your post statement. Don't just say, "Oh, I've seen this, I've seen that." They want to know what you've done. What have you done is key. Yeah, 3 sciences, 1 math, 1 language, 1 co-curricular subject. Yeah, completely fine. It depends on what exams those are. If those are APs, you should be fine. Okay, guys, so that is all for today. Thank you guys for attending, and I look forward to seeing you in BMAT surgery part 3. I'll just answer one more last question. Yeah, so you can just use AP, so advanced placements. So those are the American ones, American tests. If you have 5, then it should be fine. There's not really preferred tests. However, you want to do sciences and maths for medicine. Science and maths are the subjects you want to do. Okay, everyone. So thank you guys for attending, and I'll see you in the next session.